With infinite complaisance, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Apologies for my side of the audio for this episode. Something happened with the SD card via my Rodecaster. So this audio for my side is pulled from StreamYard itself. So that's why I sound a little bit more muffled than usual. Apologies. On this episode of Into the Fray, I welcome Barry back on with me. Now, this is part 4 of my chats with Barry. We have everything sectioned off. And the first chat was 510, the Boogeyman. Chat number 2 was 517, the Field of Screams. Chat 3 is yet to be named or aired as of right now. So I don't know where to point you yet because it's not aired yet. And then today, the section is titled The House of Ivy. And honestly, Barry, you are great at naming your own episodes just because of things that either happen to be labeled for the whole section or a certain encounter or sighting within said section. So thank you for that. You've made it very easy on me. I'm sure that I will title this one The House of Ivy because by God, that's the title of the section. But welcome back, Barry. I appreciate all of this time that you've spent with me. And there's more to come after this too.
There's more to come, and I am back. Thank you so much, Shannon, for having me here again. Who knew?
So you mentioned that you probably were going to set us up with timelines and moving from one place to this said section of your experiences. So wherever we need to start, let's do that.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day, how I was just thinking about how my wife and I decided to move from South Florida up to Central Florida and how worrisome that was for me because, we had touched on the first episode that I had a career going on and so forth. Maybe some of your listeners would be interested in some of the horror movies. I can mention a couple of them before I get off of this. Anyways, we were kind of spinning our wheels though down there. And, we had gotten married and we were living in apartments and then we were renting a condo down there. And, you know, if you're trying to make a career, a young person trying to make a career in film and television, and I was living in Florida, it was so unpredictable, such an unpredictable business that, you could be feast or famine type of thing. I had established a lot of freelance connections for art and so forth. So I was able to fill in a lot of the gaps in between projects. But once I got married, then I had another person that was relying on me to keep things steady. And I was used to the chaos, but we, we were trying to look for something a little more calmer, I guess, and looking for a job where maybe I could get benefits and that, which I was not finding. And of course, I wasn't ready to settle into that, for a long time. But anyways, we were talking about moving, and I was the one, that was really worried about that, losing all the, probably about 10 or 11 years of professional connections and so on. But, I knew that we probably should make a move in some ways in the back of my head. But one day, I was dropping, one of our cars was broke down and, I had to drop my wife off to the salon, and I was on my way back home. It was a Saturday, I believe. So I drive by and there's a sign that says psychic fair. And out of nowhere, I just do a U-turn and I pull into some little Holiday Inn in Plantation, Florida. I have like $25 in cash on me. And I walked in there and it was like psychic readings, 20 or $25. So, so I was going to spend my last dollar to do it. And it seemed crazy, but I'd been stewing in this decision, So I decided I look around. There's some, tarot cards and incense and gems for sale and so forth. I'd never been to a psychic fair before, so I thought it was interesting. And I walked in, and there's a tent set up, and I go to get a reading. And I walked in. As soon as I saw the lady, I said something to her, and she looked at me and goes, "Oh my goodness, you just read my mind." I don't remember what it was. Whatever the first thing that came into my mind just came out of my mouth, and I surprised her. So we kind of clicked. And she's looking at me. She goes, "Oh my gosh, I feel so frustrated looking at you. I just can't. I I don't know. You have all this creative energy, and it's all just bundled up, and it's not being used the way you should. I just feel a very great frustration." And she looked at me. She goes, "Are you thinking about moving?" And I said, "Well, my wife has mentioned it several times, and we've had a discussion." She goes, "Oh my God, pack your bags and go." And I was shocked. I was like, "What?" And she said, "No, I see amazing things. You just got to pack your stuff up and go. Go for it." She goes, "I see life changing opportunities for you. You just need to make this decision and do it." And so by the time I left there, I was like, wow, okay, this lady, I was kind of shocked that she, at what she did. And she goes, she actually said, "I see you walking up to a large, tall glass building. And when you get to the top floor, there's going to be two men standing there at the door waiting to greet you for your new career." And I thought, okay, that sounds a little weird, but all right, whatever. And after I left there, I confessed to my wife that I spent my last dollar getting a psychic reading. So I'm sure she's probably like, "Oh gosh, why?" That's why she handles my money, by the way. So she's the practical one, and I'm the guy that's the spender and takes these crazy U-turns at times in life. But anyways, we began talking about this, and so we decided to make a plan to come up to Central Florida for a weekend to check things out. And while we were on our way, I think on either the Turnpike or on I-95, somewhere in between South Florida and Central Florida, we're driving out in the middle of nowhere. And I suddenly get a weird feeling, and I turn my head to the left to the car that's right next to me. I'm driving 80 miles and 75, 80 miles an hour. And it's my boss and his wife. And they look over at me. It was like a slow motion, weird moment. It wasn't like a happy joy thing. It was sort of like seeing the witch on the bicycle in Wizard of Oz, kind of riding her bicycle by. It was just a really strange thing that seemed surreal. But of course, at that point, my boss and his wife were the place was not I was trying to attempt to work a more steady job, because of the production industry being so non-steady. And after a few big disappointments that occurred, I told my wife I was going to try to buck up and settled in a little bit. But this place was kind of an abusive situation, and a lot of talented artists working there. But yeah, it was not a dream job. There was no benefits. I was underpaid, and they were kind of jerky people. So I looked over, and after that, I went, "Oh my God, that is a sign. We're the decision is made. We're going." So it was just wild. The odds of that were 1 in a million, and yet it happened. So we ended up packing up our bags, and we moved to Central Florida. I had acquired a part-time art teaching job part-time, which gave me more courage to take the leap. And so we got up here, and actually I was working 6 days a week, working at a bronze foundry and then teaching part-time. So it was hard work, and I was used to that, but it was certainly not my dream situation. But you're doing what you had to do, and somewhere along that line, after within a few months of us moving back up here into another apartment complex, which was not ideal, my wife looked at me and she goes, "I want to buy a house." And I was like, "What? You crazy? We can't buy a house, you know." It's like she's like, "I'm tired of this. I want to buy a house." You know? So we began driving around looking at neighborhoods on our weekends and our day off, which would have been a Sunday probably, that we would have the day off together. And we would drive around neighborhood to neighborhood, and we started to pinpoint a couple neighborhoods that we liked. Eventually we went to a realtor. Actually, I think we went to the bank first, and the banks, they were only willing to loan us a very small, I mean, amount of money for, what we were trying to do. So when we went to the realtor, we said, "These are the areas we're interested in living, and this is our price range." And of course, that meant that we ended up with a very short list of options for a house. We looked around at some of these places, and a lot of them would have required a lot of money to put into the place, and it would have required us to live in our apartment and be renovating the house, which we could not afford to do. We were, struggling couple still, really. I mean, and we had enough money. When you move, you need the first, last security and all that kind of stuff. And so we had spent a big chunk, and our car broke down on the way on our trip. So, you know,
Oh
I'm,
gosh,
I,
of course it did,
oh,
right?
yeah, I mean, it was not the greatest entrance into our new life, but I'm driving the U-Haul, and she's driving in front of me, and I see smoke blast out of the back, and she keeps going. She got cats whining in a cage, and meanwhile, next thing you know, we are pulled off to the side of the road. We were close to our destination, but not quite. And so as soon as we had enough money to hold us over for about a month or two, but when we found out that the car needed all that money to get fixed, now we were really in trouble. So luckily, she got hired at a salon quickly, and I ended up getting hired at the bronze foundry, which Florida's already hot, but try working in a place where there's molten bronze being poured. Artistically is fascinating, but it is hard and loud work to be in an atmosphere. Anyways, I we jumped on it, and we did our best that we could to get on our feet. But again, we had this dream of buying a home, and so the realtor would take us around on our little, I don't know, whenever we were able to get together. We were so busy. I don't know how we managed it, but she took us around and we saw a bunch of places. And I was just like, oh my God, our options are running low. And then she took us to this one uh, to look at the place. The area was a very desirable area for us. It was one on our top of our list because it was an older part of town, a lot of shade trees, a lot of things were within walking distance, which was a big appeal. You could ride your bicycle everywhere, kind of thing. And it was centrally located to stuff. So that was a big appeal. But that she takes us to see this place, and it is a concrete block home, a two-bedroom, one bath. It's like 900 square feet, you know, and so it's not it wasn't a dream house, but literally the bank offered us $60,000, and we mustered up 3 grand or something. Maybe 4 grand to put into that. So I think for $64,000, we bought this little block of a house it was built in 1948. So, but it was solid, and it was in a good area. But my dad, I remember he came down and he saw the house, and he asked, "How much did you pay for that?" And I could tell he was looking at me thinking, "My son's an idiot," because he was used to prices of places up north in our little hometown area in Western New York, where you could buy a old, Victorian house for that price or something, with 4 bedrooms and 2 baths, or something. But so I could tell, he was probably thinking, "Oh, my son, he's never been brave or something." I don't know what he was thinking, but I think I could tell he was not impressed with what I did. But again, we didn't have too many choices. But when we went in to look at the house, I'm I'm surprised I didn't pick up on it, but I was so busy just looking at the structure of the house and what I needed to do to get it to where we could move in and make it livable and so forth. So the thing for that was place was solid. Everything seemed like it was in good place. It needed some work. It needed a floor treatment and some paint and maybe some carpet in a couple rooms. But other than that, seemed like it was a pretty sound structure. Except for there was one major problem with this house, and that was that there was no central air conditioning. And here we are living in Florida, and that's a big expense, But
Okay, that's actually wild that any house in Florida wouldn't have central AC.
Exactly right. And there's a reason for that. I think I could come up with, and I'll talk. Well, it'll make itself kind of self-evident here, but it was a surprise. But that's why it was in our price range, right? So, I mean, all the other places they had 1970s lime green and bright red carpet or shag carpet, and you know just old panels, and everything would have had been gutted. And I didn't have I'm working 6 days a week, and I worked 6 days a week for years, actually. So it wasn't anything I wasn't used to, but I had no spare time, very little spare time. Of course, we didn't have the money to put in or be able to live in two different places. And one thing that was good is I had a buddy who was from South Florida. He had moved up here ahead of time, and they actually showed us around when we came up to visit on that weekend before we decided to move. He was a tile guy, and I used to assist him help him out on some projects for extra money, and because he needed help when he in South Florida, because uh, he had his own business, and so I knew how to assist him. So I hired him to do the tile work in the house, and we tiled this place. So you've heard these stories when you buy a place and you start automatically changing things around. What can happen? But when we went in there with the realtor looking around, I was only busy looking at the structural thing while my wife was walking around. And after we left there, I went, "My God, that's the perfect house." And she's like, "I don't know. I just get a weird feeling about it." And I was like, "What do you mean?" "I don't know. It's just I just get a weird feeling about it." So I'm like, "Whatever, man. We don't have any more options. This is it." I said, "We can wait another year if that's what you want to do. We can wait another year." And she's like, "No." I said, "Well, we with a little paint and some tile work." I said, "It's going to be great. It's like we can walk to all those places. You can walk to the post office, walk to the grocery store. There's diners, there's places to go." And so she's like, "All right, then let's do it." So we made the decision to purchase this house. It's a big effort to go through all this. So this is months in the making, where we drove around for months, looking at places and kind of having a dream. It seemed far off because really we had only been in, we were here 6 months before we purchased the house. And so we both had pretty new jobs for the most part. And, we gosh, what was it? Get myself thought of. We just made that decision. Okay, we're going to go for it. And when we went to go to the closing of the purchase of the house, we went to some office place, big room with a big table, and the two representative realtors were there for the seller and for us. So we were filling out all the paperwork and signing all the stuff and initialing things, all that crap. And right it was an elder lady that was selling the house to us. We were in our early 30s at this point, fairly new. We had been together for 4 or 5 years at this point, but we had only been married for a year, I think, maybe a year and a half or something. But the elderly lady, just as I'm ready to sign, like the last page or something, she goes, Oh, by the way, if you see a ghost, it's my mother-in-law, and her name is Ivy. I mean, I kid you not. And I look around, and the room became totally silent, where you could hear a pin drop. Both of the realtors' jaws were literally dropped open. And I looked at my wife, and she looked at me, and I looked at the lady, and I didn't say a single word, and I signed the paper. Any normal person would have jumped up and go, "Whoa, hold on, what did you just say? Say that again." But I don't know. After getting the bank loan, getting all this stuff, I just signed the paper because I was tired of it all. I don't know. And when we drove away, my wife punched me in the arm and goes, "We bought a haunted house," and I went, I didn't think you believed that stuff, but. I said that woman was crazy or something. I don't know. She's senile, maybe. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine. And that's how we started this whole ordeal with our purchase of our first home ever.
Well, that's interesting because in my mind, I was waiting for maybe you didn't see the back of the house and it was covered in physical ivy. I was thinking the house of ivy. I was like, where's the description of the ivy? But it's not a thing or a plant. It is a person. That is, oh boy, I'm excited to hear this.
Now you know why the title, the
Now I
house.
really get the title. Yes, it is
Yeah,
Ivy's house, and she has
uh,
not left. She loves the place.
yeah, apparently. And so in the paperwork to the house, there was a mention in there that she died in there. So now we got a dead old lady, a woman that died in the house, in bed, I believe, and so
Oh,
in her sleep, I guess. So that was disturbing, but we're like, okay, there it is. Lady died in here, and her name's Ivy. Well, we got to move on, and we're busy. We have jobs. Just hurt my wife and I, and we had a couple pet cats, and we just had to move on. So my friend, the tile guy, and I began while we still were in the apartment. We began starting to do some of the big messy stuff first and foremost, get that out of the way. So he and I were going in there on the weekend and in the evenings, laying tile down, which really made the place look awesome. But little there were quirky little things that started. But for me, I have ADD. I misplace stuff a lot, but there was little things like misplaced items. And then when we first moved in, my wife would ask me, "What'd you do with this or what that?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I don't remember doing anything with it. I don't know." Be like walking around looking for stuff, and later you might find it in a drawer or something. Of course, keys and that type of thing, but nothing that would sound any alarms really, because like I say, I have ADD. I'm I can misplace things very easily, and I do it quite often. So, anyways, that was interesting. But we were getting this tile work done. Nothing, seemed too weird or anything. I didn't was not catching. I wasn't catching anything. Well, we were really busy, and my friend and I both liked rock music and had radio going and stuff. So while we were working, so if there was a noise or a bump, we wouldn't have heard anything, anyways. But when we finally moved into the place, we some odd things started to happen. We kind of got everything settled in. We were painting, painting the place and that, but we could live in the house and still paint on when we could and stuff, and take one room at a time, kind of a thing. One evening, we were in bed sleeping, middle of the night, and we wake up to a huge, loud kaboom. You jump out of bed like, "Oh my God, what in the world was that?" I jump up and I'm going around looking to figure it out what's happening. And the house is small. It's 900 square feet or something, maybe a little bit more than that. And right directly in front of there's our bedroom. There was a little teensy hallway, and then the only bathroom to the house directly across. So I went over and I saw that the shampoo bottle, which was up on a like a shelf ledge, fell down in the middle of the night down into the tub, and that's what made this kaboom sound. I was like, "What in the heck?" And I, reached up there to see if it was wet or something, and no, it was dry. And then I actually, I was trying to figure that out. I got a level out to see maybe this thing's slanted or something. No, no, it was level. It was, I was trying to figure out what happened. I thought, could one of the cats maybe? And I was looking at the situation like, no, they're old and lazy. That they're not gonna. That would be a real leap of faith for a cat to try to jump up from there up to and that was just it didn't seem to make any sense. But you just got to go, well, okay, that was odd, but I'm not going to chalk it up as paranormal at this point. I'm matter of fact, I was trying everything I could to not come to that because I don't want to live in a haunted house, and I didn't want my wife to be worried about things. So just kind of like moving on. And then another night, in the middle of the night, kaboom again. And sure enough, big full shampoo bottle, heavy shampoo bottle, drops down all the way up from up above the shower, down and hits the bottom of the tub again, and just, scares the living crap out of you in the middle of the night. And so this really was getting me, you know, the back of my mind. I was like, what is happening here? But I was determined to try to figure out, like, oh, I don't know, maybe one of the cats is getting up there, but I can't for the life of me. It just didn't seem likely. And I couldn't think of any logical reason for anything like that to be going on. So that was, just shortly after we moved in, these kind of things started to happen. The little things that make you scratch your head and go, I don't know. What was that? Well, then one night, my wife and I were in bed sleeping, middle of the night, and directly above us in the attic, something began crashing and banging and making all kinds of thumping sounds, reverberating thumping sounds right over our heads in while we were in the bedroom. And scared again. We were like, oh my God. And we are like, I'm like, what in the heck? I'm like, there's no squirrel, man. That's gotta be a raccoon up in the attic, Like what? How in the world, I'm like, it has to be a raccoon. I can't think of anything else big enough to be making that kind of noise up in the attic, but our attic was it's a tiny little house with a tiny little attic. And you can't even stand up in this attic. It's a space attic, So, and there's no air conditioning. So there's no air conditioning ducts or anything up there. It's just I peeked in there, I think just prior to, purchase it when maybe after we purchased the house, or maybe before that, I don't know. But anyway, something's in the attic, Oh my God. And it's in the middle of the night. And what are we gonna do? But we heard all this banging and crashing and noise, and then it would eventually stop. Well, of course, we have to get up and go to work in the morning, and I'm not gonna sleep easily after that all happened. Adrenaline rush, But I knew I was gonna have to do something. And I got up early in that morning and I got the ladder out and I climbed up on the roof of the house. I was really hesitant to stick my head up in the hole in the hallway, the little hatch, and put my head up there in case there was some crazy raccoon or some other large animal to jump on my head. So I did not was not really looking forward to that. So I got up on the roof and I was, I had to try to go to work, but I was trying to look around and I could not see any place where a large animal could have gotten into the house. I saw a few little cracks. I'm like, oh, I'll have to fill that. I thought, could a rat have gotten in? But it's like no rat could make that kind of not that noise, but I was confused. And then I started thinking, well, maybe it was up on the roof and but you could feel the vibration coming through. I was like, I don't believe that would be the case. It would have been more muffled. So again, I could not figure out what was going on, but we headed off to work. I think that well, whatever happened, we decided to call a trapper because I mean this was disturbing. And I did eventually, when I got home from work, I put a little ladder in the hallway and stuck my head up there reluctantly and looked around, and I did not see anything. But I mean, something had to be in there, so we called a trapper, and they arranged to come with a big box trap and put some bait in there. And he looked around and he said, "I don't see any signs of anything." But so there looked like there might be some really old mouse poop or and some birds poop or something up there, but I don't see anything, any signs of any uh, big animals of any kind or anything, certainly anything large. And it was kind of like, well, okay, geez, but we heard this kaboom, bang, loud, Guy, I could tell he was like, okay. He left the trap there and put bait in it. And then, of course, as soon as he leaves, then nothing happened. We left it up there for, I guess, a week or, close to it. And then he ended up coming back to get the trap. And so we were kind of like, oh, well, okay, thanks. Kind of felt silly a little bit, but and thought, well, maybe that whatever that was, it's done. And of course, right after the guy takes the trap, almost I don't know if it was the same night or within a day or two, it happens again. Kaboom, boom, boom, crash, bangs, thump, thump, smash, right over our heads again. And yeah, now again, we are absolutely freaked out. We call the trapper company again. Same guy shows up and he's like, "You guys again?" We're like, "Yeah, man, it's back. Whatever it is, it's back. It's making all kinds of racket." And the guys, I can I know that he's thinking we're nuts or something, because he's a good old boy, used to things. He would know if he sees raccoons scat or something around. He's like, no, sees no signs of anything up there, like he said. But he put the trap up there again for us and put some bait in there, and nothing happened. And he ends up coming back and getting his trap within the week or so, and the week after that it was kind of like, okay, what was that? We had no idea. It was weird. Yeah. So we, at this point in time, we started to think something isn't right, and we began whispering conversations, which is kind of a strange thing to have to do in your own home. But you know what? When it's one thing to go into a place for a ghost hunting thrill with a group of people to visit for one night somewhere. It's different when you have to live with something that you can't see. It'd be like living with the invisible man in your house. Can you imagine? It psychologically, this really this tormented us in a lot of ways. Not this The whole event of living there was psychologically really difficult on us, so we yeah, we decided to have a rule where you couldn't say her name in the house. We would have conversations outside of the house about her, but we still weren't convinced that we were not committing to this as a paranormal thing, even though we kind of knew it most likely was something going on, but we were not 100% committed to that. But we also know that something weird was going on. And so we would have conversations outside of the home and tried to not talk about it too much in the house. And
Now,
that
Barry, is that because was this protocol implemented because of the fact that anytime you said out loud, "Oh, maybe it's Ivy upstairs in the attic, ha ha ha," or what's with the shampoo bottles? Maybe it's Ivy. Because then you felt like it ramped up, or you just by some intuition knew that you shouldn't be calling attention to that?
Well, I'm thinking about what I just said. I think that this rule got implemented after the next events that
Okay.
occurred. Actually, now I'm thinking about it, but we started to become very uneasy about things, right? And I think that we were openly we did not we were still kind of hesitant to say that name out loud. Again, it's like me with Mr. Wolf, maybe. Um,
Mhm.
it's just kind of like, okay, let's not, maybe call it superstition, but we started to get this idea that something might be happening and that I could not explain these things that were going on, so I'm having to, unfortunately, come to terms with that crazy old lady that sold us the house may have been just being honest and telling us something that I really didn't want to hear or acknowledge. But so here's the next thing that happened, and this is when the real alarm bells kind of came on. We both went to work one day. When we got home from work, our bathroom sink was pulled off of the wall and it was just hanging there. By miracle, our house didn't get flooded or anything. I don't know. Eh, I mean, this was beyond my brain was exploding at this situation because I could not. Was looking at what had happened. I thought somebody broke into our home and you know, w- w- is what my first thought. I ran around looking in the house, and all the doors and windows were closed and locked. There was nothing else out of place or out of order. Now, the house was built in the late 1940s, and everything was still original in that house, as far as I know. And so but they made stuff really heavy duty back then. I mean, this house has withstood hurricanes and all kinds of stuff, through the years here in Florida. But this old sink, which it was attached to the wall, and it had two metal legs that supported it. For all as far as I knew, it seemed quite sturdy and perfectly fine. It was a small, tiny little bathroom, tiny little house, little bedrooms, everything's small in this little house, and everything was retro, which we liked retro. As a matter of fact, we ended up renovating the house to be retro, late 40s, early 50s. We went to the antique store and purchased, we bought furniture to look like that style. And we were taking pride in trying to fix the house up and get a vibe going that looked neat, But yeah, the sink. What in the hell happened here? And of course, again, could the cats have done this? Could one of the cats have jumped up here and that happened, I'm like, wow, the force that it would take to pull this thing off of the wall, I just, my mind was bit blown on this. I could not, and it scared me all of a sudden because oh my God, whatever this is, if this is some supernatural or paranormal thing, it's got really powerful abilities, and that really was terrifying. So I did not want to come to that conclusion. But on the other hand, I thought we can't talk about this in the house because if we do anything to piss her off anymore, I mean, I don't know what she might do to us. You start feeling like you could be in danger or something. This was really weird, and I was, I could not at this point. I kept trying to like, oh, everything's fine, darling, everything's fine. Don't worry about it. Well, at this point, it's like, okay, all right, we got to figure this. Something is going on, and so that's when we really said, okay, we're gonna we'll talk about it in the car, out in the backyard, whatever. But we're not gonna talk about this in the house. So we kind of came to this idea that we were gonna just have a rule for ourselves, and that was the rule. Well, my wife told her sister that, I think we bought a haunted house, and told her about some of the stuff. Of course, living in Florida, everybody wants to come and take vacation. And, we had a tiny little house, not hardly big enough for us, but we had a little guest bedroom. And of course, we get family that want to come and visit. And so my wife's sister and her former husband came, and he's a young, cocky guy. And he walks in, and as soon as he walks in the house, so where's what's your name? Your ghost, jokingly. And not cool, man. It's all fun and games until you got to live in that environment, And oh ho ho, it's like, well, the interesting thing is we're like, please, let's not, you know. And I know that he's thought it was a big goof, stupid joke. Well, I don't know if it was like I think it might have been the first night or second night that they were there. He One morning he was acting kind of weird, and then he's like, "I saw an old lady in your kitchen," and I thought he was joking with us, like, "Oh, great," like, it's not funny, man. Seriously, it's not. We don't want to talk about it. He was like, "No, really, I really did. There was an old lady staring at me from the kitchen, and I realized that this big old guy was actually scared." So that was the first, and he never did come back to ever visit again, which was fine. But so that happened. I again, like, do I believe this guy? But he did act like he was frightened by that situation. One of the things that happened one day, my wife worked on Saturdays at the salon, and I would oftentimes, I almost always had freelance work going on, and I would stay at home and work on an illustration, or I was that day. I had a little small studio space out in a Florida room set up with a drawing table, and I was sitting out there working on an illustration for a client, and I began to hear one of our cats, Heidi. She was a snowshoe cat, and they're kind of like a Siamese, more or less. She looked like she had a mask over her eyes, and she had this sort of a Siamese color, bright blue eyes. She was a very smart cat, and she was getting up there. Well, I don't know. She was starting to get up there in age, I guess, but I don't know how old she was really. But she was a mature cat, and I heard her verbally chatting away while I was sitting in that other room. And I thought, that's weird. What is she doing? I thought, she usually only does that if we're paying attention to her. So I decided to get up and go check it out. And I got up and I crossed over the house to the other side, which wasn't a big long distance, cut through the living room, and I looked in from the little small hallway into the little guest bedroom. Was Heidi sitting on the bed, looking up into the middle of the room, up, looking like she's looking up at something, and she's just talking away. Oh, I was like, that's weird. And I went walking into the room, and I walked right into an ice cold spot right where my cat was looking, and all the hair, it's like static. It's like all the hair is instantly went up on my body, covered in goosebumps, and all of that moment of realization, like, oh my God, I just walked into her. And I backed up out of there and I went, I'll leave you two alone now. I turned around and I went back to my drawing table. I was freaking out. I was like, oh my God. Okay. This is all real. She's here. She likes my cat at least. That's good. I don't think she likes me very much, but she likes my cat. And I thought, oh, this is getting stranger. And I'm like, should I tell my wife or not? But that happened, and it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, once the animals start to, because we can and we are quite good at dismissing things or saying, "Oh, it's just the wind," or "It's just a raccoon in the attic," or a huge rat of some sort. But once the animals start acting like that, and there is a cold spot, oh boy, now you're probably going, "Okie dokie." That's why you're like, "I'll be in here. See you later."
Yeah, it's a very strange feeling when you walk into that kind of an energy. For me, it's very powerful. I don't know, other people, maybe they don't feel it the way, but for me, I know the feeling. I've felt it throughout my life. I've been there with that more than many times. It's yours, all your senses just go on high alert. It is a very weird feeling. It's not just cold air, like it's more than that. And it's a bone chill type of a feeling. But you could I look it down at my arms and they're covered in goosebumps, and all the hairs standing. I feel the hair actually stand up on on top of my head even, and it's not, and the back of your neck, of course. But it is a very strange, intense feeling. So I knew, literally backed up. I went and I was like, but I said something. I went, okay, I'm just going to leave you two alone now. And I, I didn't, I didn't know what to do, you know, but it was weird for sure. And, that happened. So, okay, there's an old lady here, but again, and I mentioned it, and I'll mention it because the biggest thing is to realize you're living in a small space with a dead old lady that seems to be a conscious entity. You have no privacy. There's, you know, you're like, what? Is she sitting over there in the corner eating invisible popcorn watching us right now? Hey, want to get romantic? I don't think so. It's kind of feels, you're uncomfortable in your own house. You just, it is a, it is a strange thing. And the other part of the real problem is it's so isolating because I went to work, like, oh my God, something, but I can't just just go, hey, guess what, I just bought a haunted house, and there's stuff banging around in my, I had just actually, when we were right in the process of buying that house, I forgot to I'm going to do a wind back to when the psychic lady that said she saw me, a vision of me going into a glass building. Well, right while we were in the middle of purchasing our first home, and I saw an ad in the newspaper, and it was for an art job, but it was very non-specific, and I thought it seemed like a odd thing, but I thought, my wife said, why don't you just go ahead, and because I'm not gonna lie, I was really struggling with my other situation. It was really tough, and I was looking for something better, and of course none of those jobs offered me benefits, which is our goal to for moving up there. I answered this ad in the paper, sent a resume or whatever, and I ended up getting a call back. And when I went there for the interview, it was a big, tall glass building. I got in, I went all the way to the top floor, and I went to walk to the door, and there were two statues on both sides of the door of these figures, which I'm like, she said, I'm going to be greeted by two men when I walk in there. I ended up getting hired by the Ripley's Believe It or Not company, and they just started an art department in town, and so I came in at the very beginning level of with the company, and it ended up being a 17-year career for me. So the psychic was right. It's just sorry, I you know went made a full circle, but we had already moved into our new house when that happened. So, so I got a new job. I can't tell people what's going on in our private life with this crazy house. And of course, people that you do try to tell, like some family or whatever, they're sitting there thinking you're crazy or whatever. But that's the problem with you experience paranormal things and other people don't, which is a frustrating place to be at times. But we knew what was going on. We had no doubt about it at this point in time. We definitely knew that something was up, and it unfortunately. So you know, I- there was the next thing is very disturbing. So sorry if it disturbs anybody. Just I'm warning you that this is just it's weird. And so remember I said that the place had no central air. Well, it took a while for us to get the money up to be able to put the central air in, because that's not a cheap thing to do, even with a small place. And of course, we were tapped out financially, but with the car repairs and and then the down payment for the house and everything, and the money we spent for tiles and all that stuff. So, it took us another probably 6 months or so before we could address that. But in Florida, without central air, I mean, it's rough. So we knew we had to do this. So we ended up making that decision, and we had the air conditioning guys came, and I was at work that day. My wife, she worked on Saturdays and she was home on Mondays. So the air conditioning guys came and they were cutting holes for the vents in the ceilings. While they were up in this attic, the one guy yells down at my wife and says, "Hey, I found something up here." And she says, "What?" And a he hands down a VHS tape. He's like, "I found this way in the corner in the attic." What? What in the world is that? And why is that in the attic? "Oh, this is interesting. Very strange." She's like, "Okay." And she's like, "Well, whatever. I will wait until they're gone and to see what this is." And so after the workers left for the day, s- she puts the tape in. Well, she ends up realizing that it is a man in the middle of our living room, undressed, and he's touching himself and, and filming himself. Really, really disturbing. So I didn't watch it. I just threw the dang thing in the trash. But so we did know that the house had been rented out after the old lady had died. It had been rented out through the years. She had died. Let's see. I had probably been. She had been dead for at least 20 years, I think. Maybe not that much. Maybe more like 12 or 13 years, actually. But anyways, the place had been rented out for a number of years to different people. The neighbor guy uh, before this said, "Oh, there was a weird guy that was living here. Glad he's gone." I'm like, "Well, we're your new neighbors." When I got home from work, I looked at my wife first. The look on her face, I went, "What's wrong?" And she goes, "Something really disturbing." And she tells me about the tape, and I'm like, "Where is it?" And I was like, "Oh, get it out of my house." And yeah, at that point we wanted to just go back with some bleach and scrub the entire home again. But so we found that to be really strange. And then we thought, is that why the old lady was so angry, like maybe she's just angry because weird people were kept coming in. And that's her home, and strange people keep coming in there. And then she got some creeper in there doing stuff. And we, thought maybe that's why she was making all that noise in the attic. I don't know, but yeah, it's kind of a sorry. That was a weird thing to discover for us, and I'm sure it's weird for people to hear that.
I mean, what in the Buffalo Bill is going on there? All right,
Eh,
like
eh,
that is not something that you want to see. And I mean, I suppose if you're making videos like that, I would imagine you would keep them in a space where not a whole lot of people are just going to come across and go, "Oh, what's on this tape?" and plop that in. But what a shame that that got left behind when said lovely gentleman moved away for you guys to find.
Yeah, but also you wonder why was it in the attic, way in the far corner? Because took a flashlight, moved around, I didn't see anything up there, and but you'd had to go all the way back, and so that is weird, and it almost like, did this guy know the place was haunted? Did was he something going on there, or is he just weird and twisted, or wanted to leave something disturbing for others to find? I don't know. You can't imagine what goes on in somebody's head
Mm,
like that. But all I
yeah.
know is at that point, I wanted to cleanse the house or do something, but my wife was afraid for us to do anything. I mean, because I mentioned maybe we should try to find somebody to come here and she, we were afraid to stir things up. We were afraid to make this entity any angry again or anything because things had seemed like they had calmed down. Well, after that tape was gone, it does seem like we started to have calm moments in between where in the beginning, things were really ramped up. It seemed like there were times when things were felt somewhat normal for the most part. But that happened. I know one other evening I remember I was out working on an illustration, and my wife was in the bedroom and she was watching television. And so, like I said, mentioned we already had a couple of cats. They were older. I don't know. Gosh dang it. A little cute white kitten came around somehow, ended up becoming our third animal, and she was uh she was just a young juvenile kitten, more or less, and she was laying in between my wife's legs on the bed. And the way the setup was is our bed was up against a wall right next to the entrance door to our bedroom. So if you were to so the TV was facing the opposite side of the doorway at that time. And I just heard my wife say, "Something weird's going on." I'm like, "What?" And she goes, "I don't know." And I jumped up and I headed towards the bedroom, and I went into the hallway, and right at the doorway of our bedroom, I looked and I saw the kitten standing up, back arched, all the hairs standing up, frozen, staring at the doorway. And as soon as I got up there to it, I walked into the ice cold spot again. And so, and like, oh, the old lady's standing here watching, looking into the room. Maybe she's watching TV with my wife. Maybe she's looking at the cats or the new kitten that we brought home. I don't know, but I went, "Oh," this time I did say her name. "It's just Ivy," and I turned around. My wife's like, "That's not funny." I went, It's not supposed to be funny." I just went back and sat back at my drawing table, just kinda like, "Okay, this is our life now." And, we lived in this house for over 5 years or around 5 years. So, you're hearing a condensed version of a lot of stuff. But like I say, there were times when there were quiet moments or little quirky things that would happen again. But you don't know. You hear any noise, you start to wonder, or something gets moved out of place, and then you wonder. But things. were not terrifying, at least at that point, and which was good. We were starting to get sort of used to this weird idea of having a roommate, if you will. But it's some weird how you can get sort of used to things, but it still was very unnerving to say the least. I mean, and but what are you going to do? We were stuck. I mean, it wasn't like, oh crap, we could just turn around and leave this situation. Now we're committed to the bank to pay off a loan, and we didn't have big amounts of money in the bank to make big changes or just run out of there. We were pretty much committed to this at this point, and that's the hard part. Like I said, you going to visit a place that might be haunted for a thrill is one thing, but when you're stuck and have to live in that, it really is it's a whole nother thing. And yeah, we so the next thing that happened, which was I think it's going to be kind of the crescendo of things, I guess, if you will. One evening, we were in bed sleeping. My wife woke up hearing our cat Heidi again chattering away. And when she wakes up, as she hears that, from hearing that, she looks, and in our bedroom doorway, she sees a silhouette of a figure standing there. And the bathroom was directly across from our doorway of our bedroom. And that little tiny bathroom had a window in there, and there's a street light or something in the street on the other. I don't know. There's some ambient light coming in through there, so she could see this silhouette against that light. And I hear her say, "Who are you? What do you want?" or something like that. And I wake up, and I'm like, "What the hell is going on?" And I look over, and I see the figure standing there. And before I could really do anything, came floating into the bedroom and cut across the room. And the room was lit by street lights outside. You could see all the furniture in the room. It was, so it wasn't pitch black or anything. There was enough light to see what was going on. This thing cut across in front of the bed, heading my direction. And it was a human like form, milky, smoky, milky white kind of, or gray or white, kind of heading towards me. And it came over to my side of the bed, and it stopped, and it stood there looking down at me. And I don't know that it's one of the most frightening moments I've ever had in my life. I think I've had a lot of frightening moments in my life, but it's one of them. Yeah. I'm looking up at it, and it's like it's moving. It's like a smoky vapor moving, but it's in a form of what I would say a human form, and it had what looked kind of like a skeletal feature. It had two dark voids for an eye, a dark void for the mouth, and it's just hard to make out in that situation what exactly I was looking at, other than I know that it's an apparition, and I know who it's probably most likely is, and it's scaring the hell out of me. And then it just evaporates. I turn my head, looking over, and my wife is laying down sleeping. Like, what in the heck? How could she possibly have rolled over and gone back to sleep? This is insane. But I don't know what. I never went back to sleep. I was petrified, and I spent the rest of the night wide awake. And I had to get up and go to work the next morning. And oddly, we got up, and we didn't say a single word about it. We went off to work. And when we got home from work, I was like, "What happened?" She's like, "I don't know. You tell me." Like, "We've got to go outside and have this conversation." I would, so we, sounds so crazy, but like, can't have a conversation in our own home. I was like, "Okay." Well, I said, I heard you. You woke me up. And then I saw something in the doorway, and then it came floating across the room, and it came over. And she goes, "Yeah, that's what I saw," or something like that. Well, of course, the funny thing is, later I was saying, what I saw. And she goes, "Well, you didn't. You saw something different than what I saw." I'm like, "What do you mean? We both saw something at the same time." She goes, "I just saw a silhouette of a figure in the doorway or something. And you're saying you saw these details and all this stuff." I went, "Well, first of all, from your perspective, it was backlit and it did look like a silhouette. But once it came into the room heading towards me and came right up near me, and I was looking at it, and I said, I didn't see, real precise details. I saw, you know, what looked like a strange form of a human being, or I don't know, a ghostly being with well, kind of skeletal features, because it had dark voids where the eyes and the mouth would have been, maybe the nose, and it was, all I know is, freaked me out in a very intense way, to where I ended up with a bad sleep disorder that went on for a really long time. I still don't sleep well. I mean, I've always had issues with insomnia and stuff, because when you think something might just come in, pop into your room, or, just show up at any time, you kind of sleep with one eye open, I guess. But um, I really was disturbed by this, and I just couldn't help but think, this thing pulled a sink off of my wall and made things crash and bang around in the attic. It moves things. It has the ability to move objects. I, how do I know it's not going to stick a knife in me at night? And that sounds a little extreme, I know, but I mean, just your imagination can be your worst enemy with stuff like that.
Now, Barry, would you say, and you gave a great description, but would you say that it was a woman shape at all, or could you not tell something like that?
Well, it was really, would be really, I felt that, of course, I had a preconceived notion that it was an old lady, right? But the stature of it was, seemed like a smaller figure that would have been like this, like a little old woman, you know.
Mhm.
So but I did not see details of hair. When it was if walking, it was floating across the room. It looks almost like a trail of like smoky looking. It's like, it almost looked like smoke. Like if you were to take cigarette smoke in a room where there was a little light and blow that into the room. Only it was in a form, and it was it was in the form of a human being. You could see the head, the shoulders, going down. Notice I did not notice the lower half of it at all, because I was so busy looking at the upper half, which was standing there looking down at me as I was kind of leaning up a little bit in my bed on my elbows, or I don't know, maybe I had my arms out holding me up or something. But it was very close to me, within a few feet, and I was just in absolute shock, even though I knew the place is haunted. But still, to actually see it is, it's a bit of a mind blower.
Well, and for your wife, and this isn't the first time, of course, we've heard something like this, right? You have someone that sees something and she even out loud acknowledged it. Who are you? What do you want? And then by the time she or it, whatever we want to call that figure, over to your side of the bed, you look over, she's already turned over sleeping again. That's happened time and again. At least she remembered the next day, right? That would have
Yeah,
been an
yeah.
extra level of mind effery, I think, for you if the next day your wife would have been like, "What are you talking about?" I didn't see anything.
Oh my God, that would have been really upsetting. But yes, well, it's funny. She did not want to. She wanted me to describe what happened before she would, because I was. I've been dealing with this stuff my entire life. She's only been dealing with it since she moved in with me. So we've had some quirky things happen in our lives, little things. Oh, well, no, some of them were pretty big actually. And I'm going to talk about some of those earlier experiences later on in another episode. But it's a heck of a thing to have to say, "Oh, by the way, weird things happen around me." Like, what are you talking about? So, but for her to come out and admit what she saw, and then there was no. It's nice to have that validation because, yeah, when it's just you, even though you're quite sure something happened, you saw something, you have you can't validate it, and so you question yourself. At least I question myself at times when I've had personal experiences, and it's just me going, I heard that audible voice, or but there's nobody there to go, yeah, I heard too. So um, so the it was at this point. Now, there's no question we already knew, didn't take too long to realize that, we were living with this dead woman, but it was what it was. Luckily, I think she realized how terrified I was to see her because she never showed herself again. And thank God. She seemed like she laid low after that for the most part. Where, again, maybe we would. I'm sure that she enjoyed the company of my one cat, but we things seem to have calmed down after that for a good while, and thank goodness, because you cannot live like this over and over again. We had plenty of things to have problems with and stressful things in our lives. We didn't, but that is a stress that is so hard for anyone else to imagine it unless you were going through it. But we did.
So apparently, obviously, this entity, apparition, deceased person, whatever, again, whatever the label is, realized the trauma I think that she caused. So as you say, it kind of calmed down, but it sounds like that probably wasn't very comforting for you guys because it sounds like the damage had been done.
Yeah, you size that up pretty well. I mean, again, just knowing that that old woman, how it blows my mind to think that an apparition, something that's not even in our realm, a tangible thing. It's, I don't know what it is. Atoms floating around. I don't. We don't know. Nobody knows exactly what kind of energy this is. A conscious energy has the ability to physically, of course, we're talking PK here, but poltergeist type activity, that something that could take and manipulate and go, I don't know if I want these people in this house. I think I'm going to wake them up in the middle of the night by taking this shampoo bottle and knocking it over and making a really loud noise. Wake them up, you know. I mean, it's wild, you know.
I mean,
And then
she did seem to like the cats.
thank God for that. There was something, because I know that I came in there gangbusters. What both of us did. We're gonna give this thing some fresh paint. That's a nice thing about this place, which one of the selling points. We walked in there and everything was like painted white walls. Everything was solid. Everything was original. We in there for the most part, and so we I thought, well, all we got to do is put some paint on the walls and then do the floor, and of course the air conditioner. There was stuff that needed to be done. There was an old metal heater in the middle of the living room gas heater that we had removed out of there. I was like, what in the world is that? Jeez, it's a very unattractive setup. But the thing is, this I found out that this woman, her and her husband bought that house right after it was built. So they lived there and had raised their family in this little tiny house. I think they had a small family. Lived there from the 1940s, and she had became a widow and ended up living in her latter years in that house alone. And then she dies in the late 70s in bed. I couldn't help. I know this is morbid, but that's where I go. How long did she lay in that bed before somebody knew that she'd passed away? Yeah.
Right.
It's a visual you don't want to think about that's in your bedroom but I couldn't help but wonder about that, and how would that affect, was she aware that she was dead? If she see people coming into that house as intruders into her home that she had loving memories attached to, so I can understand it's got to be very frustrating to be invisible, you know, and trying to convey a message to somebody, and people were just walking right through you. Of course, she realized I was aware of her. Like, oh, excuse me, I'll just leave you alone with my cat. Tried to we tried to be somewhat respectful, or actually it was really all in fear. I mean, we were afraid to do anything to really shake things up too much. But I do think that she saw in the beginning when we started renovating things, I think she was probably really upset, and we were playing loud rock music and whatever. I got my crazy friend Tom in there putting tiles in there with me, stirring up all this stuff. But in the end, when we got all the pieces and the parts to that together, this beautiful new tile over this old terrazzo that was in there that, I like retro, but there was stuff that needed to be replaced out of there. We bought this really cool looking furniture and just had all this nice little knickknacks, and kind of was looking at I Love Lucy episodes, and for inspiration of their apartment for the furnishings, the sort of early mid-centuries type of stuff, and I was kind of taking some pride in fixing the place up, and we kind of fixed it up in her era, I would think so. And she probably started to realize that we were fixing the place, not trashing it or damaging things in some way and erasing
Yeah.
stuff. So I do feel like she started to come to terms with us, and realizing that, just like her and her husband, who had moved into that house long ago, this was our first house. We were hardworking people, we were a good couple, and we just wanted to live our life. And so ultimately, we after 5 years, there were issues with the property. It's funny, I we talked about my this is just a funny story. While we were living there was a little one-car garage in the back of the house, and I was working full-time for Ripley, believe it or not, company, making museum figures, and I would do side projects, as I mentioned, and I ended up getting involved in a low budget horror movie, and I took vacation time, which I finally got a job that had some benefits, and I was taking some vacation time, and I was out in my little garage in the middle of the night, because when you're working in a production like that, so I would be in pre-production before going on to a film set. I would spend sometimes weeks or even months preparing things ahead of time. But I'm not some big shot guy out in California in a huge FX shop. I had a little one car garage out in my backyard that it was kind of creepy having to walk out there in the middle of the night. But I was out there making body parts or whatever I was doing, and it's in the back of my backyard. But I discovered that a neighbor across the street was spying on me in the middle of the night, which, and one day he approached me. He's like, hi, I live across the street. I'm like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. And then he's like, kind of like trying to figure out a way to ask me, he's like, I couldn't help but notice that you are in your garage late at night doing stuff. And I'm like, oh, you. I'm like, well, how long has this guy been sitting there watching me? What's going on here? Kind of weirded me out. But I'm like, he was a young guy, probably in my age range, and I'm like, "Oh, you wanna see what I do in my garage?" And I walked him back to my backyard because he's like, yeah," you know, and I said, "Oh, go ahead, go in to this little side door." I said, "The light switch is on the right, right by the door or something." And I looked and I could see that he had this hesitation to go inside my garage, and I was standing there, and then he kinda, like, hesitantly opens the door and he turns on the light switch and there are body parts hanging up in there. And of course I find out that he's a big horror film fan, but at first he's like, oh my gosh, then he's like, oh, this is cool, man, what's going on? And I'm like, well, I work on B horror movies. He's like, oh, I'm a huge fan. And of course, then he wanted to borrow stuff from me every Halloween. But it was just a funny thing. Like the neighbors are spying on me, and here I am out there toiling away doing what I did. But that's a little sidetrack thing that I just thought of, but it's kind of funny.
Barry, I have to say, with you guys being who you were and you had nothing but good intentions in your lives and towards the house, and you have, the cats that she loved and everything, at least from what that's my impression of it. She liked the cats. I wonder, what did Mr. Goodbye Horses experience in that house? Because I cannot imagine that she favored him very much.
No, yeah, I know. And the other thing, I know nothing about the person except for when I introduced myself to the neighbor guys. There were two brothers that were living next door. He's like, "Oh, I'm glad to see you moving in." The guy, we didn't like
Yeah.
that guy. And one of the
Yeah.
things is we are animal lovers, right? And this guy had a big German Shepherd dog that he chained to the tree out in front of the house. I was upset to hear that. I could see that the some of the bark on the tree was worn off in a circle around it or whatever. And so the neighbor guy said, "Yeah, well, we didn't like that guy." And I went, okay, well, hey, hopefully you'll think better of me and my wife. I said, we're excited to be here. We'll be good neighbors if you need anything or whatever. We just had to
Yeah.
try to have a cordial, but he sort of said, well, whoever the guy, there was some single guy there that was weird and he seemed like he was abusive to his dog, kind of thing. So, we already were like, oh,
Yeah.
we didn't, but I never actually didn't put any thought into it really after that until the tape appeared. But I did not want to even look at that tape. So I did not, but yeah, I heard enough visual, unfortunately, in my mind to it was enough for me. But yeah, I would imagine that the old lady must have been very unhappy. But the thing is, the woman who sold the house was the old woman's daughter-in-law, right? And apparently, I think she may have said something about renting at one point, renting the house to a family member, but I don't believe that it was that guy. But that family member must have told them that, oh, by the way, the house is haunted and I'm moving out, kind of a thing.
Right.
And then they started renting the place out to other people that were non-relatives, is what I think.
Mhm.
I'm putting pieces of a puzzle together here, but that's what I'm thinking. And I I came across a little sketch that I did the other. I was looking through something, and it's kind of weird, but it may be totally unrelated, but it was so weird that I might mention it. That my wife somewhere not too long back, had a dream. It was a nightmare, actually, a really scary nightmare about that house. And in the dream, we were selling the house and trying to get it all prepped to sell. And she looks over, and there's like a window with some curtains. And she looks down and she sees these old ladies' bowed legs and feet. And suddenly, this curtain moves, and she said it was Ivy in her mind, dressed as and an old lady in her night clothes. And she went to uh, chase after her and attack her. But she said her head was like rotted meat that was all wired together and being held together with wire. It was really horrific. And that the woman was attacking her physically. She was screaming in her sleep. I think I woke her up. And it was just such a weird dream. And to dream several years later after we moved out of there, about that and the content of it, I thought, oh my gosh, that sounds like something that I would have. But she had this dream, and she described it to me like she had little chunks of her hair, almost as if she was rotted in the house, in her death state or something. I don't know, it was really horrific, but I had to try to do a little sketch of it to remember it. And I came across that just yesterday, and I don't know, just triggered my memory of it. But I thought I'd mention it. I don't know what that was all about. Maybe it was this deep rooted psychological trauma. I mean, 'cause you get post traumatic stress from stuff like this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've said it many a times, and you said it again in the beginning. If you can go to a haunted location, have your fun and your scares, and then leave, that's very different than actually that's your home. And where are you going to go?
Exactly. So yeah, we ended up, we decided we needed a bigger home, maybe one less haunted, and a lot less haunted, maybe. We were hoping to start a family, and it was time to try to, it was, again, my wife pushes the envelope with things. I would have been like, never even thought about, well, yeah, what am I saying? Yeah, we thought about moving the whole time. We were kind of stuck there. But she's like, I think our house has increased in value because suddenly, while we were living there in that 5-year period of time, the neighborhood was switching from elderly people into younger couples desiring to move into the area. New restaurants were popping up in stores and things, and it's starting to become a more trendy area. And so the values were starting to go up, and
And you guys put AC in. So thank God.
yeah, that's a huge sell, right? And the place looked amazing. If you walked in, I mean, it really did look like a little bit of a. Our house doesn't look like that anymore, but at that time, it looked like a little bit of a showcase kind of thing. Everything was kind of cool and kitsch, and we had, we were youngins, and had the some cool lighting in there and all that stuff. And so people would come in and they would all go, wow, this place is cool in here, because it didn't look like a lot outside of the place. But I painted the outside of the house too. But we really did put a lot of care into that place to get it fixed up. So yeah, it sold really quick when we did decide to put it up for sale. But boy, did I struggle about whether am I going to say at the closing, oh, by the way, if you see, you know what I mean? I really struggled about that. And I looked up all the legal stuff. I'm like, man, I don't want to get sued. Yeah, I looked up legal stuff. And at that point, you know, there were no legal things regarding ghosts. There is, in the paperwork, said that there's a woman that died in there, but I was not obligated to say anything. And truthfully, if the place was still really having amped up stuff, I would have definitely try to get somebody to come in there and cleanse that place or something, you know. But things had really calmed down after those incidents where by the time we moved out, I mean, really, there was didn't seem like there was anything happening. So I chose to keep my mouth shut. You know, it's a weird, but here's the funny thing is I drove by that place all the time. You know, you can't just walk away from it and let and forget that, you know. And actually, I ran into the person that bought it at one point in time, and she looked at me and I looked at her, you know, and I stopped and said something. She could have said something, but she didn't. And I just couldn't. I wanted to, like, anything going on here, but I just couldn't. I thought, well, if she doesn't know anything and nothing's going on with her, you know, because here's the thing. I do believe that, you know, my wife picked up on the vibe that something was off about the house. You know, I've come to realize through the years that she has abilities and she is an empathic. She has she's an empath, and then of course I obviously have uh, things going on with, I don't know, uh, call me somewhat psychic or whatever. I don't know where I fit into this all, but trying to figure that out. But anyways, so maybe this stuff affected us more than somebody else, perhaps, you know. So I maybe that was me justifying things, but at this point in time, that place is worth 7 times what we paid for it
I
in a very
bet.
popular area, and, you know, hopefully everything is good and calm for, the, whoever's there, and, you know, life goes on, but I would love, you know, from I hate unfinished projects, you know. I would love to be able to go in there and go, you got to time to move on. Go join your husband and move on from here. You know, and you know, clear the place and free that soul that's stuck there. But anyways, there that is really pretty much the full story of that. How the House of Ivy.
I mean, that's a good point. Someone like me, who's about as sensitive or empathic as a rock, might be able to move into a house like that and never ever
Yeah.
have anything happen, right? So that is a very good point. That I mean, right out of the gate, you're like, the wife was feeling a little something weird, but you were just real focused. So you might have been blocking that side of your feels out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good point. Just it might be on a case by case basis. So if Mr. Goodbye Horses was like me, maybe he just moved out when he felt like it. And it had nothing to do with seeing a full body apparition and having things ripped off of the wall. So, well, and all right. So, our next chat will be all about your haunted workplaces. So,
Oh,
again,
yeah.
we're going to continue with this haunting theme.
Yeah. Well,
And
it's
then,
almost I don't, you know, I don't know when this is going to be on the air and people will hear it down in the future, but it's starting to gear up towards October for it here right now, and
yes,
that's my favorite time of year. So,
me
and
too.
I'm going to mention for any horror fan out there, we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of George Romero's Day of the Dead, the classic. Cult zombie film this year. So I had a chance to to do some zombie work on that, and we're going to be showing that at a theater, and I'm going to be talking to the audience about some of the behind the scenes stuff. So it's going to be fun. I sent you a little clip to a little something today about that, just celebrating the Halloween season. But some of these things from my career have made they're now retro, and some of them have come out on DVDs and other things, and I don't know whether 4D or 4K or whatever. They're all these different formats now, and yeah, it's kind of neat to see stuff that from so long ago. You know, 40 years. I can't believe it. You know, but. You know, it's kind of neat though that people are still watching and interested in these old films from going back to the 80s for an old guy
Yeah,
like me.
God bless George Romero. And I would hazard to say, supposedly, maybe we will be talking a little bit more about some of your, since we're talking about haunted workplaces, I would imagine that would include film sets and things like that. I don't want to even spoil it for myself, so I'm not asking you if that is the case, but
Well,
you have had the privilege of working on some very interesting projects. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that. But Barry, thanks again so much for being willing to come on.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It was great. And I will talk to you then.